we are good to go. Mr. Black, if you are good on your end, just let me know so we can go ahead and get started.
Go right ahead, sir.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, today is Wednesday, August 10th. It is 9:02. We are on Zoom for the ERC Committee, Economic Revitalization Committee, and we're going to discuss a number of items today, particularly a few related to the Old City development. Number one on the agenda is that, and we've got some representatives from Pine Ridge to give us an update and hear what they have to say. So either Jerry or Mark, if you'd like to take the lead on that.
Absolutely. Actually, we have Delta joining us today, as Delta's been working with us on a lot of this grant funding. I believe Leroy would like to say a few things to start us off.
Okay, Jerry, thank you. And thank you, Councilman Biter, for arranging this meeting this morning. We have been working for really the last 30 days to put together a public-private partnership. I know a lot of people use that term, but in this case, we're really working to create an exciting opportunity that we think will provide some very important economic returns for the city of Williamsport, for Lycoming County, and for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. I know that we distributed materials in advance that provide background on the project. I know many of you are familiar with the project, but what I'd like to do, with your permission, is go to enclosure number 3 in your packet. Enclosure number 3 really illustrates the specific role of each one of the potential partners in this project. I've had an opportunity to be in front of the ERC on many occasions, and I think you've come to expect a complete illustration of the project budget, the role of their respective partners, and the return on investment that would be provided by the project. So if you would look at enclosure 3, I'd like to start on the left-hand side. What we wanted to do is illustrate for you the project in terms of each component and its cost. As you will see, looking across the bottom, we have illustrated the percentage of participation of each of the partners. What I would share with you all is that in many situations, when we apply for federal and/or state funds, there is usually a local participation. I think many of you are familiar with previous projects where that percent of participation could vary anywhere from 10% to as high as 50%. I must tell you, in all the time that I've been coming in front of the city of Williamsport, this probably represents the best return on investment and the best illustration of leveraging private investment. Because you will see at the bottom, we've identified a state role of roughly 3.9%. We've identified a county participation rate of 3.9%. And if the city would be willing to consider the partnership, a participation rate of 3.5%. The private developer in this case would provide really all but 90% of the funding for the project. And what I would share with all of you is that I think that 90% will actually increase because of the cost of materials and because of project increased costs. But I'd like to give you an update on where we're at on the partnership. We have worked hard with Senator Yaw to develop a capital assistance request. One of the reasons why there's a sense of urgency about these dates, and I apologize for that, is because the state is going to open and close an RACP application period with 30 days. It's a little unusual, not unusual in terms of the end of an administration, but in this case, the RACP applications are due on August the 19th. We have developed the application. We've developed all the component parts. We've illustrated the economic impacts, which we'll talk about in a little bit. and we'll be prepared to submit that application on August the 19th with the full support of Senator Yaw. Last week, we had an opportunity to visit with Lycoming County. We talked with them about their participation in the partnership, specifically their role in facilitating part of the cost of the garage. And I'm pleased to report that they approved tentatively that parking garage participation and are scheduled tomorrow to adopt the resolution to actually submit the application. So they've not only committed to funding as of last week, tomorrow they will actually support a resolution for the submission of the application, which means we're left now with the opportunity to talk to the city about a role in the project. And I want to indicate that we've thought pretty carefully about the role of the city in this case. And what we've identified is a request to have the city of Williamsport participate in funding the rooftop facility on top of the structure, to consider assistance with the Graphius Run project, to look at water sewer projects associated with the project. The total contribution we'd be requesting is $897,375. I know the city has a lot of requests for their ARPA dollars. I know these resources are valuable in terms of facilitating opportunities in the city. What I'd like to do now is turn your attention to attachment 6A and 6B. One of the things that I thought might be helpful for the ERC is to talk specifically about the eligibility requirements of the use of ARPA funds for this project. And with that, Darren, maybe you could highlight in those two enclosures the eligibility standards that we would use if the city were willing to participate.
Yeah, thanks, Leroy, and thank you, everyone. If you look at attachment 6A, we have some excerpts from the final Treasury rule. And I know Teresa has been working with the city in terms of the ARPA guidelines and strategy. But what we saw from this project was opportunity to assist with infrastructure as listed in spending on government services. So we see some of the infrastructure needs that Leroy outlined as a way for the city to participate. In addition to that, one of the proposed potential tenants could be a healthcare facility that would be put into this structure. And so some of the facilities that would support that in terms of the parking deck, the rooftop park, would be something that we see as eligible under those guidelines. So on top of that, we see this part of the community, the Old City neighborhood, as you're aware, as an area that's underdeveloped, has suffered blight over the years. It's an emerging opportunity. And these funds we see as an opportunity to respond to those negative impacts that have occurred over the years due to the disproportionate impact of blight that has occurred in those communities. So those were some things that we saw as potential opportunities for investment and justification of the ARPA funds as part of this project. Really, attachment 6B, you've probably seen these before. Those are the specific Treasury guidelines. We had highlighted in there some of the appropriate uses that we thought this fell under. I won't go into those in detail, but we think from those things that I've identified through attachment 6A that those meet the standards outlined in the ARPA guidelines.
I think one of the most important considerations as you evaluate opportunities for the use of those resources is the return on investment and the economic impact of proposed projects. Included in your packet as attachment 2 is an illustration of economic impacts created by the Basin Street Development Project, we've broken those economic impacts into two categories. One are construction impacts, and then second is the ongoing operations. And I wanted to demonstrate not only the municipal return, but the return for the school district, the return for the county, the return for the state, the total impact of employment compensation. And this chart illustrates that in terms of job creation, in terms of tax benefits. So it's illustrated there in terms of a return on investment. What I'd really like to do, though, is talk about why the city might consider participating in this project. I'm excited about the rooftop project for the city of Williamsport because I really believe that the vision Jerry has created for this facility will allow it to be a destination point. One of the things we'd like to do with the project is to create a synergy where people are drawn to the city of Williamsport to utilize a facility that will create opportunities then for ancillary businesses like the DeSalvo restaurant, for example. The destination point obviously exists with Little League Baseball, but there are other attractive features about the city. And we believe that the rooftop park can be one of those destination attractions. And Jerry, maybe you could share your vision for what that looks like and why we're excited about the opportunity.
Absolutely. And what I'll do is I'll give a quick overview of the total project, finishing with the rooftop for those who haven't had the opportunity to see anything, read about it, or hear about it. At a 36,000-foot view of the project, it's a three-phase project stretching between 3rd and 4th Street, coming up Basin, and then returning down 4th Street. Phase 1 of the project has 12 townhomes over 6,000 to 7,000 square feet of retail space. Again, making an L shape from 3rd up Basin, with parking tucked behind it for off street. Phase 2 and 3 kind of have a synergistic feel to it, where we have a 40,000 square foot commercial building, again, retail on the first floor, offices on floors 2 and 3, serviced by a 3-level parking garage, currently at 165 parking stalls. The whole entire project, roof and garage, commercial and garage, take up a 17,000 square foot rooftop. The vision for the rooftop started out to be a green roof. We could responsibly shed water without putting it back naturally into the stormwater system. That then took a life to bring up and say, how can we identify a place to bring people, give something to Williamsport that's, as Leroy said, a destination. That became a playground with food trucks and a small beer garden up there. As we looked at what that could be, we added some features that could make this a 4-season environment, not shutting down in November and opening back up in March. We've got some feel to it for the winter season, and actually a park and a playground always pull people into it. I think putting the right treescapes up there, the right grass environment, somebody can go spend a day on the playground roof.
Thank you, Jerry. I think one of the other things we'd like to highlight as part of this request is the history of how this all evolved. The city was really the catalyst for creating the committee that really created a vision for Old City. And the leadership in the initial projects were like Lycoming College, have had an opportunity to work closely with President Tracky. And maybe you could share the original committee vision for this and the role of the college moving forward.
Sure. Good morning, Councilman. I join Leroy and Jerry and others in thanking you for taking some time to hear our presentation this morning. Excited to be talking to you and to be at this phase where we have a final budget and are proceeding with in a partnership with Pine Ridge and two limited liability corporations. I'm not going to go through the history in detail. I think either all or several of you were at our groundbreaking ceremony where I did review in some detail, but I would just like to note that as somebody who's been involved in this for 9 years now, I've been incredibly grateful for the leadership and participation of council. As I noted in my remarks there, it was really members of council who came to me as individuals when I was first in office to inquire, did I see a role for Lycoming College in partnering with government and potentially private investors to finally do something about the need to revitalize what we've come to call Old City. As you undoubtedly also know, we had a commission that was appointed by the previous administration. Council had participation on that commission along with the county, and I was fortunate enough to serve on it. And that report, and a report was produced and unanimously adopted by council that pretty much incorporates the vision that we're bringing to you today. Obviously, there's been some evolution as we have refined things. So really, the first thing I want to say is I want to express on behalf of the college and now also our new partners, Pine Ridge, gratitude for council's leadership and participation. As you also know, there's been a previous history of 12 grants that have been secured for making infrastructure investments in the Old City area, and each time we needed council to step up and be a partner in that, demonstrating local participation. You were, glad to do that, and we're hopeful that we can engage with you in a similar way. I think as a final thought, I would note that in response to the question, if you will, from the council members 9 years ago, the college has, of course, been engaged, and that we have taken really the lead in making the initial investments. And you may be aware, but the investments that we've made in the Craft Gateway Center and now in the Music Center, also an acquisition of property in the area, exceeds $20 million. And so while the college is not listed on the sheet you see in front of you today, the college has made very substantial investments to initiate this process. And then, the next step for us was to go out and find a private developer, and we issued a request for qualifications, and we had several submittals and interviewed some of those firms, and Pine Ridge very quickly rose to the top. And I think you can see in Jerry's comments and in the design for this project that we found somebody who shares our vision for recreating a neighborhood in Old City, a neighborhood that will benefit the residents of the city, of the county, that will bring in outside visitors, and at the same time be attractive to the students and faculty and staff at Lycoming College. So council, again, thank you, councilman, for giving us an opportunity to present to you this morning, and I'm glad to join the others in answering questions that you may have at this point. Are we ready for questions, Leroy? I think we are.
Sure. I think the only other thing I would say is a point that you made, President Tracky. The RCAP process is a very competitive process. We think we've got a great project for the Commonwealth to consider. One of the things that I would share with you that most of you are aware of is the fact that the reason we've been 12 for 12 in our request is because we've illustrated a city-county partnership that included private developers and the leadership of the college. In this particular case, the competition for these dollars is going to be even more significant. And so we're hoping the city will consider some participation, because I can tell you one of the key scoring factors in evaluating applications is the partnership that is demonstrated as part of an application, which is what we're trying to do with this comprehensive funding strategy. And with that, we'll turn it over to you, Councilman Biter, for questions and or responses.
Thank you very much. Some enlightening information to receive, but a few questions that I have just right off the bat, for some clarity. The deadline for this application is August 18th. Is that correct?
August 19th.
August 19th. So we have 9 days to decide whether or not we would be committed to $900,000 for this project.
What we would do as part of the application, if the timeline was tight, is illustrate that we're working on the partnership commitments for each of the phases. We would have some additional time as they begin to evaluate the applications. So we know there's a process, and we would follow that process with you. If additional time was required, I think we can accommodate that.
Okay, because I will be very upfront. Additional time is going to be required.
Okay.
We have a council meeting tomorrow night, which this is not on the agenda for, and we do not have another council meeting until September. So there's going to be a lot of discussion between not only the 3 members that are present today, but also the other 4. And I'm sure they're going to have other questions. So some members of this group may be asked to reconvene, whether it be at a council meeting or another time. So I do appreciate that. With the investment made by Lycoming College, you had mentioned $20 million of investment. How much of that investment was done through donation, and how much of that was done through either financing or out of general funds from Lycoming College?
I'm going to have to give you an estimate, Councilman.
That's fine.
I was not anticipating that that particular question. So when we say donations, what we're talking about is the college raising funds from its constituents, and that is built into both our operating budget and also to major projects that we do. So I would say, Chip, probably 10 to 12 million has been in the form of commitments, philanthropic commitments. 5 or 6 million has been taken out of the college's plant fund. We have a substantial plant fund so that we don't have to necessarily finance amounts of that size. So that would be roughly the division, Councilman, would be 10 to 12 million in philanthropic contributions and 5 to 6 million in funds drawn from the college's plant fund. If it's important, I can have my CFO provide precise figures for that.
Just to get a general idea, because obviously with you being the lead on that project, it's good to know what Lycoming College's alumni and current student base expects for their return. And we appreciate everything that you're doing there, because it's completely opened up and changed the whole dynamic of that area, which is why Mr. DeSalvo is here to talk a little bit later as well during this meeting. So,
right. Thank you, Councilman. Appreciate that.
Mm-hmm. The other question that I have then is, so as these phases start to happen, let me pull up the piece here. So it looks like this particular phase would be phase 3, where this rooftop park would be. The Graphius Run portion of that, I got to go back here to pull up the spreadsheet. So Graphius Run shoring is listed as a line item of $55,000, and then water sewer of $150,000. So, but roughly $205,000 for those 2 projects. Where is it that Graphius Run is at that the shoring would have to be done?
That's at the corner of 4th and Basin. It clips the property, probably coming in about 10 to 15 feet, and clips it on an angle.
And I assume that's all underground, things like that.
Correct.
Yeah. We seem to not be able to escape Graphius Run anywhere you go in this
And
part.
Mr. Bider, excuse me, this is excuse me, this is John Sander. Just wanted to
Yes.
point out that is actually the previous flow path of Graphius Run before it was confined to the current culvert system to the west. That's the old Graphius Run flow path, which is now just a stormwater collection facility.
Okay.
So just
All
like
right.
just clarifying. Thank you.
No, I appreciate that very much, Mr. Sanders. Thank you.
Yep.
I'm gonna yield the floor here, see if Mr. Pelizzi or Mr. Mackey have any questions in the meantime while I jot down some notes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bider. Yes, I have some questions. First of all, thank you very much, everyone, for being here. Appreciate it. You know, if anybody that sat in on a city council with me, when we start talking about projects, I'm usually the one that jumps right over to dollars and cents. And I understand the request that's being made of the city to contribute ARPA funds for, you know, developing and progressing this project, to work in it together. My approach is always kind of what return do we look at? You know, you're asking us to make an investment in this project. And as someone that's representing the taxpayers of the city, I feel compelled to ask, well, what kind of return are we going to look at? And I did hear Mr. Brown mention earlier, and I forget what attachment it was, specifically gone over in lieu of whether it be mercantile tax, business privilege tax, all those other taxes. What does the city expect to see in returns over what time period to, you know, for us to be able to justify the $900,000 request?
Well, thank you for that question. If I could go back to attachment 2, I would respond in a number of ways. First, what we tried to do is anticipate business privilege tax, mercantile tax, and local services tax. We think conservatively that would provide $50,000 a year in a municipal return, although it would be enhanced by the $37,000 during the construction. So we anticipate a first year return of about $100,000. The other thing we didn't illustrate here is we anticipate the creation of 120 jobs. The economic impact of those new jobs in the city are also fairly significant. But then what we did was we showed the totality of the return on the investment, and the totality of the return on an annual basis is about $1.7 million. So for that city return, if we went with just the municipal impacts, we'd be looking at a return of investment in about a 7-year period. If we look at the total economic return annually, it would be 2 times the investment in the first year.
Okay, so I guess really what I'm looking for, and I apologize if I'm the form in which I'm asking the question makes it a little bit harder to understand. So over 7 years, Mr. Brown, what should the city expect to receive directly in reimbursement? I guess in lieu, that could be in the form of, you know, whatever the tax base may be. You know, obviously this is going to have a great impact on the property values in the area. So I'm hoping to see that some increased real estate tax, property tax, whatever it may be, but also, like you said, job creation, those additional taxes that the city is going to see directly coming back to them. I'm looking at attachment number 2 here. I'm looking at illustrative direct tax impact, municipal impact of construction one time and operations annually. So a one-time direct tax impact for the construction of the project of approximately $37,598. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay. And then we're looking at an annual additional impact of approximately $49,806. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So year one, the city's looking to get back about $87,404.
That's correct.
Okay.
You know, one of the things I should add in light of your questions is how we identified a city role and city participation. And the thing that I wanted to emphasize is we tried to create an investment opportunity for the city that would create other economic benefits that I did not illustrate on this chart. And that is the destination that we create with that rooftop facility, we think will create an economic impact that goes beyond this. I did not, for conservative purposes, put a multiplier impact in here. We used IMPLAN as our economic impact tool. It's a conservative tool, but for example, we hope that it will draw people to the city to make other expenditures, whether it be in a store, whether it be in a restaurant. And so those economic impacts are not illustrated here. The other thing that I would say to you that I think is pretty important is the city will have many requests for those dollars. One of the other things we tried to do with this request is have the city invest in infrastructure that provides a return for an extended period of time. Therefore, the improvements to the water sewer, the improvements to Graffius Run, and the parking structure itself, we think creates an opportunity for the city to enjoy a return on its investment that goes way beyond just the numbers associated with that one project.
Okay. I guess I would wonder, how difficult would it be, Mr. Brown, to be able to get some of those multipliers and work them in here?
We could do that for you. We'd be happy to take these basic illustrated impacts and show you the multiplier value of that investment.
Mm-hmm. And again, like I said, I have to, I like this project. I think it's I want to see this project work. I just got to get down to the numbers is where I look at it. And at a request of $897,375. And then you deduct the first year's tax impact of the one-time construction, $37,598, and the illustrative direct tax annual from operations of $49,806. That leaves us with a balance of $809,971. If I divide that out by the expected annual illustrative direct tax impact of $49,806 annually, that's going to take us 16.262 years to see a complete return on our investment. So for me, if you're able to provide us with some of those multipliers to show us a little bit more of the other impacts that we're going to see here, to help show our return in maybe a little bit more of a timely fashion, that would really help me to understand the project a bit more.
We will do that. I'll be happy to get you that information. I guess the only other thing I would say is that $897,000 investment creates a $25 million project for the city of Williamsport. I suspect that as you evaluate the projects, the return on investment, that $25 million investment in the city of Williamsport will probably be, if not the largest, certainly one of the largest returns on investment that I have certainly seen, not only in Williamsport, but across the Commonwealth. Mm-hmm. It's unusual to have a project where a 3% contribution creates a $25 million project. It's really rare. I understand your request. We'll get those additional impacts to you and try to qualify in a statement the total return to the city of Williamsport.
I understand it's kind of a moving target. I've worked around construction too. It can be very, very fluid situation. There's always going to be unknown multipliers, unforeseen circumstances. But if you're able to get us some estimated projections, I would really appreciate that very much.
You've got it.
Thank you. And I will say that the information that you guys have provided to us so far is extremely helpful. And I think provides an awful lot of clarity for everyone to understand, the overall scope of the project. And if I may, I did have one more question, and then John, I'll gladly yield the floor to whatever questions you may have. Where am I? Attachment 1, project summary. So page 2 specifically, I'm looking at the illustrated concept of the development project, and the legend shows buildings color coded by way of phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and phase 4. I'll give you a minute to get to where I'm at.
Sure. Jerry, you want to help me with this one?
Give that one to me again, one more time.
This is enclosure 2. I think he's asking about the phases and the color codes that are illustrated on enclosure 2.
Hi,
Right.
Jerry. Yeah, I'm on page A2 of your executive summary.
Okay, so phase 1 encompasses 12 townhomes totaling about 25,000 square feet of living space. We've got 6,000 to 7,000 square feet of retail space on level 1 for CBD. Going to the northeast corner, that's got 40,000 square feet total space. Again, 16,000 square feet of retail on level 1, which could be retail or office space. And then a remaining 24 to 25,000 square feet of commercial space for offices. And then the parking garage, again, I'm not sure what the square footage, but it's 165 stalls.
I guess the one thing I am seeing that I see above it on the first page of this executive summary, I see phase 1, townhomes and outdoor parking, phase 2, office, retail and circulation, phase 3, parking garage and rooftop park. However, I don't see any description of what phase 4 would be. However, I see phase 4 structures on the legend and illustrated on the map below.
Correct. Phase 4 is still in the works. It's probably not something.
Okay.
Yeah, and it wouldn't be seeking these funds right now.
Okay, understood. That's what I was just trying to get some clarity on. Thank you.
Yeah.
And with that,
I think what I'll also give you guys quickly, we talk about economic impact. To date, we've also privately invested just over $4 million in other property acquisitions separate of this project to tie it all together. A couple of those well-known are the old Maroon's Pub, which will be slated for something to be torn down or reinvented there. Next to the bricks, we purchased a property that was, I believe, a former dentist office. We call it the Worcester Building. That's up for complete renovation and refresh. So I think for us, this type of economic investment spurs those kind of developments. I think when you look at what's also slated from other private developers going both east and west, this is the catalyst for that development to happen. So I know as Leroy reworks some numbers and sends them over to you guys, it's hard to quantify that impact, but it's out there.
yeah, big splashes cause lots of ripples, man. And if we can see, the benefit of all those far-reaching ripples, it would just very, very much help me. At least looking at the dollars and cents to have a better grasp and to understand the project. So I really appreciate that very much. Thank you. I have no further questions right now. John, if you have it, go ahead, buddy.
Thanks, Vince. Yeah, Vince is our return on investment guy, for sure. I do have some questions, and my first would be, do we have a projected completion dates on all of these phases? Is that even something that we can project or that you can project?
I can give you kind of roundabouts. We're breaking ground here late August, early September on phase 1. That's slated to complete May of 23. The commercial building, we're hoping to start more November, depending on the winter season. It could be November of this year or most likely March of 23. Again, on a 12-month schedule as way construction goes these days, completing the commercial and the parking garage in spring of 24.
Okay. The townhomes specifically, am I to understand these will be for sale or for rent?
For sale.
And do we have any idea on how much those are going to be going for?
We haven't established that price point yet. We're still out for bidding. One, we're hoping to see some normalization in the markets to get our costs back in line. The initial intent for these was to be affordable housing, and I put affordable as what the market is these days. It seems as though that rate keeps climbing daily for the median incomes and what people can purchase.
And then as far as the retail space goes, it's a lot of retail space. Who's taking the lead on filling this retail space?
So it's a joint effort between our internal team and Fish Real Estate as they look to bring in a collection of tenants. What we've given them was a tenant makeup. What we envisioned a walking environment would be in an urban city, a coffee shop, a pizza shop, bringing in a hair salon, a bookstore, a butcher market. So they've been working to identify who some of those small businesses are in the community or outside of the community that we can bring in.
And then the rooftop deck here, I'm looking at the renderings. This is just for my own curiosity. How exactly are you getting these food trucks up there?
That is the number one question we're asked. It's actually a faux food truck. What we do is we frame it up as we would frame any structure, and then we take the sleeve and slide it right over.
Okay, so they're going to be permanent then.
Yeah, and then the image there is that we would have a vinyl graphic, so as people change their menus or vendors come and go,
Sure.
We can refresh it constantly.
And what do you envision for that that glass structure on the top?
We would see that being about 3,000 square feet, small bar up on the roof that could service what we call a beer garden in a responsible way.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's all I have for right now, Eric.
All right, well, I do appreciate everybody's time this morning. We've got a couple more things on the agenda, so I am going to ask that we move on from this topic. Considering what I said about our timeline, there are no decisions that will be made today, and considering we are on a digital platform and do abide by sunshine laws, we will not be making any recommendations at this point in time. But rest assured, this will be a topic of conversation for a little while now. That being said, if any of you are not involved in any of the items, feel free to go ahead and excuse yourselves. We appreciate your time this morning.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Next up on the agenda is item number 2, the resolution agreement between the city and the Department of the Army for the levy. Mayor Slaughter was going to present that. I do not see him here. Was there anybody else that was going to? Oh, there he is on the phone. I'm sorry, Mayor. If you would like to go ahead and get started with that.
Sure. Yes. Thank you, Councilman Biter and members of the ERC committee. I do have to join by phone today as I'm heading out of town for a conference. But what you have before you is a resolution for an agreement between the Department of the Army and the City of Williamsport. And this is for an accelerated levy system evaluation. As we all know, levy is the number one priority at the moment to get that accreditation and recertified for a number of reasons, to protect business, industry, residential properties, and to keep obviously insurance from going through the roof. So this agreement between the Army Corps of Engineers and the city is the first step for them to start the risk assessment, which is required as part of that process. We have the city and Wood, and the county, the state, federal, we've all been involved in this for a number of years now. We've identified a number of deficiencies, and council has already approved to begin some of the work on those deficiencies. However, we still need to do this risk assessment. It's a requirement, so this is not optional. As far as some people have been asking, why are we doing a risk assessment if we already have identified some of the deficiencies? So this is required by the Army Corps of Engineers to come and do this assessment. And this is an accelerated one, so this should take anywhere from 12 to 18 months, give or take, which is about half of the time it was previously. I believe it was around 3 years or so for the previous assessment that the Army Corps of Engineers conducted. So that's good news for us that this is an accelerated evaluation. This is a 50-50 cost share between the city of Williamsport and the Army Corps of Engineers, which is just under $1 million. So a little under 500,000 for each of us. And upon review, and if it gets approval from the full body of council, this then would go back to the Army Corps of Engineers for the Colonel Penchason, to sign off on to start this risk assessment process in the very near future. We are number one in the queue at this point, which is, again, is good news for us to start this, because we can't get, as was noted, we can't get accreditation or recertification without this assessment. The goal would be at the end, between what we already have identified as deficient and then this assessment, we would then look to see if there's any additional items that need to be improved upon, or are the deficiencies that we already know and are working on, is that enough to get that accreditation recertification? So that's what this assessment will look at as well. John Sander, of course, is here, our city engineer, and he can add any additional insight into anything I may have missed with this agreement. Thank you.
All right. Just the number one question that I have, that I'm sure the other two councilmen have, is the $481,500 price tag that this study has. What sorts of funding are we going to be using to pay for this?
Yeah, so I've spoken with the chamber a number of years ago. They did allocate $500,000 towards the levy system. And so I did speak with them regarding this. And so that is a possibility. And I've also spoken with some of our federal delegation. If we were to use ARPA, we would just need to get a federal exception to use that for the levy system, which is a possibility. You technically right now cannot use federal to federal, but we could ask for an exception. So there's a few different funding options at this point that we're exploring in order to fulfill our 50% share of the cost.
Okay. Councilman Mackey or Councilman Pelizzi, do you have any questions to follow up with? Obviously, this is a very important piece for our city to go forward and continue to develop.
Thank you very much, Mr. Biter. No, at this point in time, I mean, you hit exactly what I was going to ask about as far as where the funding mechanism was coming from. Mayor, thank you very much for explaining that. This is very important for our city, for the future of the city, you know, and the protection that it provides to the city. So it's one of those things, none of us like to see a price tag like this, but it has to be done. Mr. Mackey, oh, I didn't know if you were trying to talk. You were on mute.
No, you got, it's funding. Yeah, you guys, I'm not going to ask it for the third time. So
Appreciate it. All right.
Yeah, and I could, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt.
Oh, go ahead.
I could just add one other item that I should have thanked initially Congressman Keller. He did, through congressional directed spending, ask for through that congressional directed spending for $8 million for our levy system. So that obviously would have to go through committee and everything, but I did want to thank him for the request he put in on behalf of our levy in the amount of $8 million. And so, of course, obviously we don't know yet if we'll receive that, but that will clearly help with the total cost of the levy improvements. So I did want to note that and thank him for that. So thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mayor, for your presentation on that. We'll go ahead and move on to the next item then. I appreciate the Mr. DeSalvo and Mr. Carnaval being patient with us as we got through these pieces, but I felt it was important. We talked about the Old City development as what we're about to talk about here with the vacating Spring Garden Street directly impacts what decisions we make with the Old City development. So, Mr. Nar.
Good morning, Councilman Bider and members of ERC. As a segue into the Old City development, what we are requesting is the vacation of Spring Garden Street. It's in length, it's 208 feet by 20 feet wide. It's between East Edwin Street and East Forest Street. What this would actually do is the city would vacate our interest in that. And the adjacent properties would actually have a say as far as what the property would be used for. The two properties are DeSalvo Restaurant as well as Lycoming College. I do have a letter from Lycoming College in support of the vacating of this, so that the further development of Old City will include the DeSalvo's redevelopment of their property at this time. Once the city would vacate their responsibility, they would be required to do a quiet title, as well as any underground utilities or utilities in that get easement agreements from them at that point in time. And I can answer any questions, and obviously we do have representatives here.
I would just like to ask if the representatives from DeSalvo's would like to share anything, if they may, about what their plan is for that particular project. I know that there's been a lot of talk about things going on down there. You guys invested quite a bit when you redid your patio and then your outdoor/indoor bar. I think it's been at least 10 years ago now that you did that. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for your time this morning and everybody participating in this. The main reason us with the vacation asking Lycoming to relinquish their claim to their portion of is, as we move forward with the redevelopment of the main structure, which is the bar deli area and portion of the restaurant, is to bring that into a multi-use facility. We are currently planning on, based on the city's proposal for the redevelopment of the 4th Street, are going to be losing some parking based on that street improvement project that we're still waiting on the final designs. But that's going to recapture some of our parking.
Looks like we lost him on that.
I apologize, but regardless, we're trying to be able to reestablish the frontage of the building and be able to move our design plans forward, and that is a piece of the design. We've been in conversations with Lycoming about what they're planning on doing with the warehouse building for about 3 years, maybe 4 now moving forward. Because that seems to be the 4th corner that hasn't had anything done to it. I'm assuming that at some point something's going to happen with that structure. So we're trying to position ourselves so that we can prepare for either a re-front the building to face Franklin, if that's a possibility at this point, and or maintain our 4th Street presence. At this point, we're trying to find out exactly what's going to be the best attack and the best approach. We're considering spending in excess of $3 million to do the rest of our redevelopment in that particular project. Senator Yaw has been very helpful in acquiring a grant for us as well. Everybody thinks that it's to redevelop a restaurant, but it's really not. We're trying to couple our project which we've been working on now that Pine Ridge is in. So, there's multiple things that are happening, beyond the college sector, in the private sector. So that's kind of our commitment to it. So the reason for the alley is for us to be able to move forward and understand how that we can either change the front of the building, add square footage to the building, because we're going to be losing parking. There's just a lot of questions that are kind of holding us back from being able to send our final designs through, so that we can actually make a public announcement of what's going to happen there and bring people up to speed on it.
Excellent. I appreciate the update. Councilman Pelisi or Councilman Mackey, any further questions?
No, I don't. I completely understand your request, Mr. DeSalvo, Mr. Carnival. It seems logical and it makes sense. So good luck with your project.
Thank you.
No questions here, Eric. No.
Thank you very much, both of you. Again, thank you very much for being patient with us as we made it through the other two items, but I felt it was necessary. We talked about those first, considering the impact that it directly has upon your project. Again, no recommendations are to be made today, but we appreciate your time being here, and this will be talked about at our council meeting on Thursday. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for your time today.
Moving on to the next item, number 4, resolution to commit to funding for the Greenways, Trails, and Recreation Program for the Basin Street Riverwalk construction. Mr. Sanders, I know we talked about this before. This is to allow pedestrians access from basically Panera through the under the underpass, and then over the railroad tracks. So if you'd like to
Yes, sir. So obviously you guys are all familiar with this. I brought this to you a few months ago. It was a 2-phased project at that time, as Eric mentioned, from essentially Panera to the terminus, which would be the Riverwalk. DCED is very interested in helping us out with this connection. However, they want to make this one singular project. So as before we had 2 phases, simply want to combine it into 1 phase. We previously were awarded the grant funding for the first phase. They want to combine them both and just make it 1 phase. So we are going after a grant, a GTRP grant still, in the amount of $250,000 with a local match of $142,056. Like I said, myself, the fantastic analyst at DCED and the mayor have been back and forth quite a bit with some correspondence. And I know Teresa from Delta is working diligently on her end as well. So this is just kind of repackaging it, so to speak. We were looking to pay for the match with, I would assume, ARPA money, because we don't really have $142,000 sitting around readily available in other places. So let me know if you have any questions.
As you said, Mr. Sanders, this is just a repackaging of what we had already talked about. I think that this is a project well worth the $142,000 out of ARPA funds to match. The Riverwalk is heavily trafficked by many people, and it's a little difficult to get to, specifically from the base of Hepburn Street. You've got to go onto Maynard and then get on the highway to get off the highway to park your car. So to have a little bit more foot traffic there. And then once again, this directly coincides with the Old City project for access. So you're going to have a lot of hopeful foot traffic from Lycoming College and the development happening there in Old City, so people can access that part of the Riverwalk.
Yes, sir.
I'll yield the floor to other council members if they have a question.
No questions at this time. Just a very good recap. Thank you.
Yeah, no questions here, but I would second Councilman Biter's sentiment that this would definitely be a good expenditure of ARPA money. I do know we have a lot of unassigned funds still in the recreation line item. So I feel like that would definitely fall under recreation for sure.
Excellent. Thank you both. And thank you, Mr. Sanders. But Mr. Sanders, you are up again for Number 5, resolution of agreement between the city of Williamsport and the Williamsport Area School District. Mr. Sanders.
Yes, yes. So a few weeks back, Williamsport Area School District put out a paving project at Cochran Elementary. They bid it out actually, and Hallbaker was the awarded contractor. I assume I don't assume they were the low bid. They repaved the entire Cochran school parking lot, did a fantastic job. There was a small section along the southern portion. It's a city alley that serves 5 houses there. The school district and Hallbaker approached me to see if we could pay for that portion because it's not in the city, or excuse me, the school district's right of way. So it was for $7,000. I said yes, and this is allowing us to have the agreement between the city and the school district to allow that to happen. I'm looking to utilize liquid fuels for the $7,000 worth of work. It's already done, actually. So, any questions?
Not too many. It's already done, and you already have the funding source from that for liquid fuels. So I noticed that about a week ago when I was on a walk, I saw that it had been done, and was very pleased to see that it was on. And you're correct; they did do a great job.
And I will note that this year with the paving project, we did save about $60,000 with so all the obviously the water authority owns all of our stormwater assets in the city now. So there was 20 or so inlets on the paving project. They are paid by the water authority. So we saved roughly 60 grand with so this 7,000 is, not much, so to speak.
So between the 7,000 for that and the money saved, we've roughly paid for that, and then the cost of our paving inspector then with that.
Well put. Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Sanders. Councilman Pelisi, or
I appreciate it. I just did have a quick question for you. Now that we're on the topic of, the savings that we were able to recognize this year. And with the paving inspector, John, have you noticed that there's been, I guess I would say a decrease in city residents reaching out due to inadequate paving or anything now that we have this inspector that's here keeping an eye on what's being done?
Sure, I'd say the same amount of comments or complaints as before, actually. I know they're tagging along with Big Rock at all times, with the exception of when Big Rock is paving for either any utility companies, which is not what we hired them for. So they aren't always with them. But to answer your question directly, it's pretty much the same amount of items that come to me, because ultimately they just get passed to me ultimately as well anyway. So I'd say about the same.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
all right.
No questions here.
Thank you, Councilman Mackey. The last piece on the agenda today is any related items. Anything from the other members of council, members of the administration? All right. Seeing and hearing none, the one thing that we do have to vote on, we have to take a motion and a vote to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Everybody have a great day, and I will see all of you tomorrow.
Take care.